Once upon a time, there was a woman who was feeling kind of lonely. And so she went to the pet store and decided to buy a rather expensive parrot. In fact, the parrot cost more than $1,000. But she was willing to do that because she was told that the parrot was a very good talker. And she thought it would be good to have someone around the house that she could have a conversation with. So she took the parrot home and put him in his cage, but an entire day went by and the parrot did not speak a single syllable. So the woman went back to the pet store and looked over all the different bird supplies that they had there and figured that maybe what her bird needed was a ladder. And if the parrot started hopping up and down on the ladder, that would relax him and start him talking. And so she bought the ladder and took it home and put it in the parrot's cage, but still the bird didn't talk. So again, she went back to the pet store and looked over all the many different items they had there in the bird section. And she figured, well, maybe what her parrot needed was a mirror. If he saw his own reflection, that would encourage him to start gabbing away. So she bought the mirror, took it home, and put it in the bird's cage. But still, the parrot didn't talk. Well, one more time, she went back to the pet store and demanded to speak to the manager and complained to him that her bird still didn't talk. So the two of them went over to the bird display and looked over all the different items they had there. And the manager said, well, maybe what your bird needs is a swing. If he starts rocking back and forth, that will get him to talk. And so the woman bought the swing and took it home and put it in the bird's cage, and still the bird didn't talk. Well, the next day, the woman walked into the pet store in tears. The manager said, well, what's wrong? The woman went on to explain that her parrot had just died. The manager said, well, that's awful. I'm so sorry. But before he died, did he ever say anything? And the woman said, well, yes. Right before he died, he looked at me and said, doesn't that pet store sell any bird seed? I'm starving. Faced with all the choices there in that pet store, that woman failed to make the right choice. She failed to choose what her bird needed the most. Choose well, because the choices that you make in life have consequences. That's the message that we find here in this passage that we listen to today from the book of Deuteronomy. The scene is that the Hebrew people are near the end of their 40-year journey that had taken them out of slavery in Egypt and had put them on the verge of entering into that new and special land that God had vowed to give them. But before the people entered the promised land, Moses reviewed for the people again the laws that God wanted them to live by in that land. In fact, the title of this book of the Bible, Deuteronomy, literally means a second giving of the law. At its heart in Deuteronomy, Moses wanted to make sure that the people understood and had a clear sense of the kinds of choices that God wanted them to make once they entered that land. And in particular, Moses wanted the people to understand that the choices they made mattered to God, that the choices they made had consequences, and ultimately the choices they would make would either lead them to blessings and a life, or they would lead them to hardships and to death. in the first century of the Christian church, a book known as the Didache was written. The title of that book, the Didache, literally means the teaching, and was a summary of what those first Christians believed and taught. And the Didache begins with these words: there are two ways. A way that leads to life, and a way that leads to death. And there is a great difference between those ways. Which path do you take? The Didache asks. Back in the 6th century, when new monks were wanting to join the order that Saint Benedict had founded, Benedict forced those new monks to make a choice every day. You see, when the new monks entered the monastery, they were asked to take off their street clothes and to put on the garments of a monk. But Benedict had those new monks store their street clothes in an unlocked closet. By doing that, Benedict was forcing those new monks to make a choice every day as to whether they wanted to continue being a monk and to put on the garments of a monk, or to whether to go back to putting on their street clothes and leaving the monastery. Choose, Benedict was saying. Choose which way you want to go in life. As far as God is concerned in Deuteronomy, being a person of faith is not just a matter of making a one-time decision to follow God. No, as far as God is concerned, being a person of faith is a matter of making choices every day, choosing to do what God wants us to do, or choosing to go in some other way. Because as far as Deuteronomy is concerned, those are the only options that exist. Either we choose God's way, making choices that lead us closer and closer to the blessings and the life that God wants us to have, or we choose to turn away from God's ways and make choices that lead us closer and closer to hardships and to death. The problem, though, is that we don't usually think of the choices that we make as mattering that much. After all, virtually every day we make choices. In the dairy section of the grocery store, we choose between skim or 2% or whole milk. At Wendy's, we choose between small, medium, or large French fries. Or when we go to buy blue jeans, we choose between Lee or Levi or Jordache or Bugle Boy. But the thing is that when you read Deuteronomy, one of the surprising things we find is that God cares about all the choices that we make in life. Not just the choices that we make about religious matters. For instance, in Deuteronomy, we find that God cares about the choices we make when it comes to what we eat, encouraging us to consider whether we are making